may be able to fake a smile, but you can't fool your smartphone. As part of a recent study, sensors placed on smartphones to gauge depression are giving researchers a remarkably accurate picture of our feelings. Stephen Schueller, an assistant professor in Northwestern University's Department of Preventative Medicine, is a researcher on the study, and he joins us now. Welcome, Professor Schueller. What led you to believe smartphones would give an accurate picture of depressed feelings in people?
Well, Tanya, that's a great question. In this Northwestern study, we really were going off of the insight that people keep their smartphones with them 24 hours a day. I mean, if you think about it, your smartphone is rarely out of the reach of your hand. And as a clinical psychologist, I'm often interested in what's going on in my patient's life, and I don't know the answer to that question, but your smartphone does.
And so tell us how these sensors work and how accurate did they prove to be?
So your phone is learning information about you all the time, where you're at, what you're doing, who you're calling, who you're texting. And so much like Google tracks this information for, all sorts of different purposes, we decided to try to use this information for mental health. And we found out actually that these sensors were quite accurate in predicting depression. We were actually able to classify individuals with or without depression accurately 87% of the time.
87%. Now, so what correlated with depression? Spending more time on the phone?
Spending more time on the phone was one of them. And if we look that people with depression spent about 4 times as much time on the phone, 68 minutes compared to those without depression, 17 minutes. What was actually more predictive was these location features. How often you're spending time at particular places, how much time you're spending at work versus home, how many different places you're visiting, kind of what you're doing was a much stronger prediction than, using your phone.
So let me take a wild guess. The longer we spend at work, the more depressed we are? Just guessing.
Well, that was one of the things. Actually, what was really interesting was the strongest feature was kind of looking at the rhythm or the daily habits that people are doing in their life. So people who tend to do things on a more consistent basis. So, show up at work at the same time, get home at the same time, were actually less depressed than people who had more disruption in their daily rhythm.
Very interesting. So that's a point for regularity in our lives, or at least some consistency. Now, what about all the game apps we have on our phones and all the web surfing we do? Does that represent some kind of avoidance behavior?
That's one of our predictions. We didn't look at that as detailed in this Northwestern study, and we want to go look at that more deeply in further studies that we do. But it's definitely something that we think would be likely, is that people use their phone a lot for distraction, and that's probably why we saw people who use their phone more actually have higher rates of depression.
So breaking down all this data that we have now, how can it help the people who are depressed, and what does it mean for researchers going forward?
I think there's really 2 things to think about. One is monitoring, and that's, your phone can tell you if you're depressed or kind of if you're slipping. Kind of like if your partner, your best friend pulls you over and says, hey, things aren't going so well for you right now. Your phone can do that same thing. And so it might be able to give you a warning before, things get out of control. And the other real important application is that of treatment. A lot of the treatments that psychologists do to try to combat depression work around getting people more active, getting people doing more things. And we could actually feed some of this information back to your treatment provider, your psychologist, your primary care provider, to help them know if you're actually doing the things that are going to get you better and are getting better.
I have a business idea here, an app that will alert you to depression. I want you to develop that one. All right, thank you so much, Professor Schueller, for that.
Thank you.